But it's only been 6 days. And I think it will be important for him to have the room to staff up, to figure out what his priorities are. To be able to distinguish between what he was campaigning on and what is practical, what he can actually achieve. There are certain things that make for good sound bites but don't translate into good policy. And that's something that he and his team, I think, will wrestle with, in the same way that every president wrestles with. I did say to him, as I've said publicly, that because of the nature of the campaigns, and the bitterness and ferocity of the campaigns, that it's really important to try to send some signals of unity. And to reach out to minority groups or women or others that were concerned about the tenor of the campaign. And I think that's something that he will want to do. But this is all happening real fast. He's got commitments to supporters that helped to get him here, and he's going to have to balance those. And over the coming weeks and months and years, my hope is that those impulses ultimately win out. But it's a little too early to start making judgments on that. Question, and your view of his qualifications. Has that changed after meeting with him? President Obama, I think that he successfully mobilized a big chunk of the country to vote for him. And he's going to win. He has won. He's going to be the next president. And regardless of what experience or assumptions he brought to the office. This office has a way of waking you up. And those aspects of his positions or predispositions that don't match up with reality he will find shaken up pretty quick. Because reality has a way of asserting itself. And some of his gifts that obviously allowed him to execute one of the biggest political upsets in history. Those are ones that hopefully he will put to good use on behalf of all the American people. Scott Horsley. Question, thank you, Mr. President. You're off to Europe, which is facing some of the same populist pressures we see at work in this country. When you spoke at the UN, you talked about the choice we're facing between integration and building walls. What choice do you think the American people made last week? And is there still a chance for what you called a course correction before Europeans make some of their choices? President Obama, I think the American people recognize that the world has shrunk. That it's interconnected, that you're not going to put that genie back in the bottle. The American people recognize that their careers, or their kids' careers, are going to have to be more. Dynamic, that they might not be working at a single plant for 30 years, but they might have to change careers. They might have to get more education. They might have to retool or retrain. And I think the American people are game for that. They want to make sure that the rules of the game are fair. And what that means is that if you look at surveys around Americans' attitudes on trade, the majority of the American people still support trade. But they're concerned about whether or not trade is fair, and whether we've got the same access to other countries' markets as they have with us. is there just a race to the bottom when it comes to wages, and so forth? Now, I made an argument thus far, unsuccessfully, that the trade deal we had organized, TPP, did exactly that, that it strengthened workers' rights and environmental rights. Leveled the playing field and, as a consequences, would be good for American workers and American businesses. But that's a complex argument to make when people remember plants closing and jobs being offshored. So part of what I think this election reflected was people wanting that course correction that you described. And the message around stopping surges of immigration. Not creating new trade deals that may be unfair. I think those were themes that played a prominent role in the campaign. As we now shift to governing, my argument is that we do need to make sure that we have an orderly, lawful immigration process, but that if it is orderly and lawful, immigration is good for our economy. It keeps this country young. It keeps it dynamic. We have entrepreneurs and strivers who come here and are willing to take risks. And that's part of the reason why America, historically, has been successful. It's part of the reason why our economy is stronger and better positioned than most of our other competitors. Is because we got a younger population that's more dynamic. When it comes to trade, I think when you're governing, it will become increasingly apparent that if you were to just eliminate trade deals with Mexico, for example, well, you've got a global supply chain. The parts that are allowing auto plants that were about to shut down to now employ double. shifts is because they're bringing in some of those parts to assemble out of Mexico. And so it's not as simple as it might have seemed. And the key for us, when I say us, I mean Americans, but I think particularly for progressives, is to say your concerns are real. Your anxieties are real. Here's how we fix them: higher minimum wage. Stronger worker protections so workers have more leverage to get a bigger piece of the pie. Stronger financial regulations, not weaker ones. Yes to trade, but trade that ensures that these other countries that trade with us aren't engaging in child labor, for example. Being attentive to inequality and not tone deaf to it. But offering prescriptions that are actually going to help folks that are in communities that feel forgotten. That's going to be our most important strategy. And I think we can successfully do that. People will still be looking to the United States. Our example will still carry great weight. And it continues to be my strong belief that the way we are going to make sure that everybody feels a part of this global economy is not by shutting ourselves off from each other, even if we could. But rather by working together more effectively than we have in the past. Martha Raddatz. Question: Thanks, Mr. President. We heard some of the harsh words you had about Mr. Trump, calling him temperamentally unfit to be commander-in-chief. Did anything surprise you about President-elect Trump when you met with him in your office? And also I want to know, does anything concern you about a Trump presidency? President Obama, well, we had a very cordial conversation. And that didn't surprise me to some degree because I think that he is obviously a gregarious person. He's somebody who I think likes to mix it up and to have a vigorous debate. And what's clear is that he was able to tap into, yes, the anxiety. But also the enthusiasm of his voters in a way that was impressive. And I said so to him, because I think that to the extent that there were a lot of folks who missed the Trump phenomenon. I think that connection that he was able to make with his supporters. That was impervious to events that might have sunk another candidate. That's powerful stuff. I also think that he is coming to this office with fewer said hard and fast. Policy prescriptions than a lot of other presidents might be arriving with. I don't think he is ideological. I think ultimately he's pragmatic in that way. And that can serve him well, as long as he's got good people around him and he has a clear sense of direction. Do I have concerns? Absolutely. Of course, I've got concerns. He and I differ on a whole bunch of issues. But the federal government and our democracy is not a speedboat. It's an ocean liner, as I discovered when I came into office. It took a lot of really hard work for us to make significant policy changes even in our first 2 years. When we had larger majorities than Mr. Trump will enjoy when he comes into office. And one of the things I advised him to do was to make sure that before he commits to certain courses of action, he's really dug in and thought through how various issues play themselves out. I'll use an obvious example where we have a difference. But it will be interesting to see what happens in the coming year, and that's the Affordable Care Act. So obviously this has been the holy grail for Republicans over the last 6 7 years was we've got to kill Obamacare. Now, that has been taken as an article of faith that this is terrible. It doesn't work and we have to undo it. But now that Republicans are in charge, they got to take a look and say, let's see. We got 20 million people who have health insurance who didn't have it before. Healthcare costs generally have gone up at a significantly slower rate since Obamacare was passed than they did before. Which has saved the federal treasury hundreds of billions of dollars. People who have health insurance are benefiting in all sorts. Of ways that they may not be aware of, everything from no longer having lifetime limits on the claims that they can make. To seniors getting prescription drug discounts under Medicare, to free mammograms. Now, it's one thing to characterize this thing as not working when it's just an abstraction. Now, suddenly, you're in charge and you're going to repeal it. Okay, well, what happens to those 20 million people who have health insurance? Are you going to just kick them off and suddenly they don't have health insurance? And in what ways are their lives better because of that? Are you going to repeal the provision that ensures that if you do have health insurance on your job, and you lose your job or you change jobs or you start a small business that you're not discriminated against because you've got a pre-existing condition? That's really popular. How are you going to replace it? Are you going to change the policy that kids can stay on their parents? Health insurance plan until they're 26? How are you going to approach all these issues?